Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Jess, and you're listening to Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about how your therapist might be a bad client. I'm going to share some of our stories about being clients, what goes through our heads as a therapist who's also a client, and we'll talk a little bit about what it's like to have those experiences on both sides of the couch when we ghost our therapists or our clients ghost us.
This episode's a long time coming. I feel like we often share horror stories of ourselves as clients. You'll probably have heard it throughout our podcast, certain like different experiences we've had. But something that kind of has come up and people have asked us about for our podcast is what's it like for us as clients? And what's it like when other clients might feel like they're bad clients? And some of those stories might be ghosting or other things that they can do to their therapist. And how do we really feel? And so we thought, let's combine them both together and have a podcast episode on it.
Yeah. And it is, I think in a lot of ways, one of my hopes for this is that it can kind of take some of the wind out of like feelings of guilt or feeling like you're doing therapy wrong. If we can just let you know that even as professionals in one context, that doesn't mean that we're okay in any other context.
It's all in the podcast name. And
It's
I'm
all in
pretty
the
sure
name.
you just gave away the the lead. We are bad clients.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if anyone was on the edge of their seat for that one. I thought it was obvious.
Not Ryan and Jess, they clearly are very hinged people.
They seem really put together, right?
We really are put together and extraordinarily great at being vulnerable.
I'm very graceful. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just kind of start this off in a fun way by telling some stories that we have about
Mm.
us as clients and what we've experienced from therapists as well. It's not all going to be funny. Actually, some of it is about difficult experiences we've had as clients as well. So yeah, looking forward to sharing some of this with you. I'll start with a little story of which I may have shared part of before. But many years ago, oh geez, this was probably about 13 years ago now. Um, I was working in a residential detox. And so, kind of mental health field, but first getting my feet wet in it, kind of new to the whole thing. And that field, especially residential kind of work, is really high burnout. So I was really struggling in life and in work with that. And we had therapy through the insurance that we had. So I decided to try to access that and see if I could get some help. And it was not good. It was very not good. I think one of the things, and I took a lot of learning from this as a provider as well, is that I felt fairly well held in the first session. And I felt like, we were kind of starting to build rapport and that this was a person I could trust. We didn't talk at all about diagnosis. And this is something that in the States, therapists typically have to diagnose, especially if they're going to be billing insurance. And so since this was through my insurance, and I didn't know all the details of this at that time, but I
No.
was going to be diagnosed. Um, but the therapist that I saw never raised that. But because I had this whole like all-inclusive kind of insurance system where like all the providers are under this one umbrella and there was like an online platform for scheduling and stuff like that, I just got a notification like a day after my session that just said, "You have a new diagnosis." Ding. You have major
Oh no.
depressive recurrent. And I was like, "Oh, okay.
Oh
That's
wow.
nice. I would have liked to talk about that." And
Mhm.
also, I have some of the same concerns to this day about the way diagnosis can operate in the field. And thinking like, one of my biggest ethos when I'm training other providers and thinking about diagnosis as a provider is doing that collaboratively and talking the client through it, seeing kind of if they see what I'm seeing, if they feel that that diagnosis is supportive and helpful to them, just inviting them to be a part of that process and being upfront about it. And part of that is because I had that experience of just getting diagnosed kind of unbeknownst to me and feeling like you know that from 1 hour? You've decided that? And this is not to like extremely fault that provider necessarily either, like, because she probably wasn't wrong. She definitely wasn't wrong. The shoe fits. But it was the process that didn't land well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can imagine like when you have to see that in an email pop up, it almost feels like, where's the trust here? Like, what else are you saying behind my back? Or like, what are you really thinking? All those kind of questions that clients generally have of us anyway.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it just kind of a weird moment that I felt like I thought this was going to be kind of a supportive space, and it seems to instead be maybe more of a judgmental space.
Hmm. I think that aspect of being dropped is something I've known a lot as a client. When I when I first started therapy, it was a little bit long time coming. I'd gone through a lot and I felt like I had kind of run away from my past in a lot of ways. And when I actually could get to university because I saved up enough money, I was never thinking I could go to university. I was very poor growing up. And so it really took saving pennies, but also actually getting out of the country and working overseas for a little bit that opened my eyes to realizing I could do it. And when I landed in university, I became a poster child for like anyone can do it, which at the time felt so cool, like that I could be in like the school's magazines and talking about poverty, da da da. But I think one of the things that they really liked at the university was that I had quite a complicated past that brought me to university. What they didn't do was give me any therapy. Like they gave me to their marketing team, but they didn't give me to the school therapist. So it actually took me a long time before I even had the courage to go myself because no one was saying, Jess, like your past is something that needs to be talked about and processed rather than something that could bring in new students, new recruits. So I was in my late 20s before I ever saw my first therapist. And that was actually a good experience. It's kind of why I like training new professionals because the therapist I had was a trainee therapist. Even though I could go to university, I'd save my pennies. So it's not like I had a lot of money to buy like the best of the best therapists. I had to go for a student. And she was probably the best therapist I've ever had.
Mm.
And so it kind of makes me realize like it doesn't matter if you're a trainee. I've had very accomplished therapists and many of them have failed in my life. And this one didn't. She stood with me. She got me a cup of coffee, which as a kid was really cool. Kid, late
I
30s.
was
Like,
like, did you just say you were in your late 20s?
I'm so
Old
old now that
kiddo.
oh, that's all back in the day. Um, yes, I was not a kid. I just look back at that time as if I was. Um, So she really met me where I was at, and she did the telltale thing that made me realize how important it is sometimes, just linking things. And I kept talking about drowning. I felt like I was drowning in schoolwork. I felt like I was drowning in my friendships and my relationships. And she linked that to some of the trauma I had had growing up, that I was using that very language of something. That link for me made me realize how much I was still holding on to some of my past trauma. And it was something I don't think I could have realized without someone pointing it out to me. It makes me realize by sometimes just linking words and doing something that might seem obvious as a therapist actually usually is not that obvious when we're the talker, when we're processing it verbally. And I kind of left that experience thinking that every therapist would be able to do these kinds of things.
Mm.
And I was sorely misjudging of that situation. There were a lot of therapists that would look at my story and be like, oh, that might be a bit too intense for me. And it's really tough when you share something and someone says that to you. Even if you like, if I've been seeing them for a while and I finally want to share, and or people being like, I just wish I was your mom and I could give you a cuddle. And I'm like, I really don't think that's helpful right now. Did you not just listen to what I said to you? And so I think that like I
Hmm.
don't have anything very specific about one thing necessarily, just a lot of experiences of me kind of leaving the room wondering why I decided to go in the first place.
Mm. Yeah, I feel I'm thinking about what you said about student therapists there at the beginning as well, of that being a really positive experience. Is something I often tell trainees is like, because they often come in feeling like, oh, isn't it kind of like not great for a client to get me? And I'm like, actually, I think student therapists are often some of the best. You have like the passion, the engagement, and also when you see a student therapist as a client, you're actually seeing like 15 therapists because they've got supervisors and professors and consult groups, and like they have all this focused attention on supporting them and helping them process cases in,
Mhm.
a holding an anonymous way. But yeah, so that I think actually means like you're seeing super therapist. Um, so I just wanted to kind of connect with that.
Yeah.
Um, I've definitely had that experience of walking out of a first session or even a much later session and thinking like, man, what am I doing? And there was one particular one where I had like an argument with the therapist because I was talking about wanting to unionize at my workplace and
Mhm.
wanting to support the people that reported to me, like through like helping to develop something for the staff to advocate. It was a pretty large organization. And she just like outright said, "You're middle management, you can't be involved in a union. Like you're the enemy." Like literally said like you're their enemy. And I was like, "Well, thank you. That's probably literally what I'm coming here to process is that I don't want to be their enemy." That I don't want that. I don't need you to just tell me that I'm the bad guy. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then walking out like, what is it? But there are many other times that I've walked out and thought like, I don't know about this. I don't think it's going very well. And then I keep going back for a long time.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to leave a therapist because I don't want to hurt their feelings.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, you want to be like, kind of like, maybe they'll get it right this next time.
Right. And I do think that's another thing that can be in my mind sometimes when I'm working with clients. And if a client doesn't want to work with me and tells me, I'm always really happy about that. Because I'm like, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you felt safe enough that even though I'm not the right therapist, we have enough trust for you to say, you're not the right therapist for me. Even if you don't do it in those exact words, I often try to just like have like my radars open to like, oh, okay, maybe I could make some suggestions for you for places that would be a better fit.
Mm. There was one time I got in a fight with my therapist too.
Hmm.
Okay, to be fair, I do think this could have worked on someone else. I think it could have just been a me problem. So I'm just gonna say that as a caveat.
All right.
I was in Edinburgh and I was like knee deep in studies. And you remember how like stressed we were? We had so much on our plate all the time.
Oh, yes, it was bizarre.
So much. And so I went to see a therapist. And one of the things about our program is that you're not just becoming a therapist and like by the book, you're also doing a lot of introspective work. So you're kind of like tearing yourself apart as you become a good therapist. So I'm struggling. Like I'm in full struggle bus mode. And I was talking to this therapist I had been seeing for months then. And she's like, I think this will be exactly what you need right now. And she gives me this little tiny like bowl. And she's like, your life is like this. And she puts three pebbles in the bowl, like boom, boom, boom. And she's like, and what you really need is, and then she took out of the bowl. She's like, that's life. I'm like,
That's life.
I'm like crying. And she gives me this little bowl full of pebbles. Now, I think maybe the imagery could have been helpful to somebody, but I was like,
Mm-mm.
what in the world is this? And I got so angry. I'm like, I just shared all of this stuff and you gave me a bowl with pebbles. And I I left her house. Did I leave early? I don't think I left early because I'm one of those clients also. It's like maybe I can work through this. Um, And she was quite surprised when I came back the next week to see her because I was like, I want to process this anger. It's actually the very first time I've ever been angry at a therapist before, and I think it's really good. And she's like, I didn't think I was ever going to see you again. And I could not tell if she wanted to never see me again or
Well,
if she was just curious that she wouldn't see me again.
there's only one thing in this story that I think you're wrong about, Jess, and that's when you said I think it might have worked for someone else. That is just dreadful. Although I will say I catch myself sometimes doing a wacky metaphor, and I usually just acknowledge it too. And I'm like, hey, this metaphor is something we want to discard. That's okay with me. Just so you
No,
know.
the thing is, she kept looking at the bowl throughout like me telling the story, and I just thought I think she had this locked and loaded. Like I think she was waiting for her turn to share this.
That it does remind me of the story I shared on here before of like when I kept re-saying a thing because I thought it was so brilliant and my client was like, I heard you. It's kind of is like because I came in locked and loaded with that too. Like I had gone to consultation and I was like, this is gonna be the thing. Wrong. Wrong. So, I guess we've all been there. Mm,
Oh. But
yeah.
I also often am like, I will stick it out because I don't want to hurt their feelings or I don't want to tell them that they did it wrong. That was actually the only experience I've ever had where I've told a therapist. And it was just because I was so miserable and it was such a weird thing that happened that I could like break out of that defense of like wanting to be a good client that I could be like, what the actual? Um, but most of the time, like I just want to be a good client. And I think I understand how weird it is to be trying to share your most vulnerable things with a stranger. Because trust isn't established yet, and you don't know who this person is, and you don't know what they can or cannot handle. And the same thing we do, or at least I do with many people, is like try to find common ground or get to know them. And you're in a situation where that's completely not possible. And you then still have to trust them. So when clients come to me and they don't want to share something right away, I innately understand that. Like seeing a therapist is quite bizarre. It really is one of the most formative relationships that you can have to kind of start to build your own self confidence and mental health. It's also one of the weirder ones because there's no other relationship really that's not reciprocal.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, and I think that's something that we've talked about before is like that kind of thing where clients want to be the favorite. I actually
Mm.
think we kind of had an episode on that at some point. Um, and this is a good episode for me to share that like I want to be the favorite too. In fact, I'm quite certain sometimes that I'm the coolest, the smartest, the hottest, the favorite client, that I'm just like, that I'm obviously the person they're most excited to see. How could I not be?
I'm always most excited to see you.
Thanks, Jess.
So I can verify that. Probably your therapist loves you.
And then I also sometimes think my therapist probably dreads me. But yeah, I think it's kind of important to like I wanted to just share that like we can fall prey very much to that as well. And that's a normal wanting to be liked, wanting to be a favorite, wanting to be number one is a very normal human experience. It's really part of our kind of essential narcissism that allows us to continue existing. Um, and that kind of often links into my inner dialogue when I'm a client. So I'll often have an inner dialogue where I'm thinking about like what my therapist is thinking about me
Hmm.
or where I'm being scathing to my therapist. And I'm afraid to say it out loud because I'm very conflict avoidant in my personal life. And that includes as a client so that I'll be thinking like, oh, this is what I would say if I were training you. Like there was a nice try, but like you didn't quite get it, or you're missing some things, or they'll do something that it's clear that they're trying to lean into some bit of theory, and I want to say like, I'm sorry, which theorist are you relying on right now? Like what is leading you to this conclusion? Because you're getting it wrong. Or I'll be thinking like, yeah, that's not really what transference is, but it was a nice try.
That is so condescending. Nice try. Wow. Nice try, kiddo.
A for effort.
This is a learning opportunity for you, therapist.
That's what I think too, but obviously they're not going to learn if I never say it. And but I don't say it for exactly what you're saying right now. It's so mean and condescending and patronizing. So I bottle that all up.
But therapy is the place where you could have conflict. You could learn, Ryan, and grow and hatch as a butterfly.
Those are things for other people, Jess. Being healthy and growing through therapy couldn't be me.
That's why I'm a therapist.
Ding. At your service. Ready to help.
I um I would love to make fun of you if I didn't have an email in my draft bin. That's a little bit embarrassing right now.
Ooh, let's hear about it.
So I want to go back to therapy and just like have something very consistent. I think I have the time and I have the finances, so I was thinking like this would be really good. And like I've always had the idea that like good therapists have their own therapist. And so I kind of was like, well, maybe put your money where your mouth is. So I'm doing that. And this is how I did it. And I have not sent this. I'm going to redraft. I laughed at myself after writing this. But I wrote, my name's Jess. I'm a doctor. I have my PhD in psychodynamic therapy. Do you, I wrote, do you know what that is? It's so bad. I run my own clinic in Toronto, and I'm a supervisor who train students. Do you think you can help somebody who has these kinds of credentials? And then I wrote, furthermore, I have a history of like trauma. Are like, can you handle that? Because I don't, I said, because I don't want to have a session only to be dropped. Anyway, I'm drafting this and I'm feeling all like energized, da da da. And then I read it and I was like, oh my God, Jess, this is the most defensive email I have ever read. And then I like deleted it all and just said, hi, I'm Jess. I need help. Can I have a consult? And so I thought, oh, I'm so defensive. But I think it's just, I think getting a new therapist is scary. And I think that was like my way of trying to make sure that someone can hold me. But if I received that email, I would be like, I don't want to go anywhere near you, you conceited fuck. Like, I would not have wanted to see me. And all I want is just a therapist. And I was like, anyway, so it was a big amount of like, delete, 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 delete. We got to redraft this.
I get that. I mean, it can be so intimidating to try to find a good therapist, whoever you are, right? And I think we
Yeah.
have a lot running through our heads about it as therapists. So like, something that I would read into that too is like it's almost this big smoke screen of like, stay away from me. Like
Yes.
you can't handle me.
Yes. Prove yourself before you even like know who I am. Absolutely.
Hmm.
And I probably would, like, when I see this person, be like, I think I have some defenses I need to work through to trust you. Um, but I then reminded myself it's mentally healthy to be able to catch yourself and laugh. It's not necessarily like recognizing your defenses are not the bad thing. Like, that's okay. And it's just like wondering where they're coming from. And I think it is that aspect of being burned by therapists can lead us to not want to do this one more time. And I have so many clients that have come through and they've been through the ringer. And as a therapist, we might have this veneer that we somehow think this field is just like wholly positive. Um, and it's not. We've definitely been dropped, you and I. And when clients come in, they're like, I don't want to have to tell this one more time. I totally know that wariness, that like one more kick of the can, like one more stab at this. And I think that when I saw that email, I'm like, oh, you totally resonate with clients that have had to do this before.
Hmm. For sure. Yeah. And I think about that kind of on both sides of the like that starting over again feels really hard. That's another one of those reasons why I often don't leave a therapist is I'm like, ugh, and then when am I going to do this again? And I feel that as a provider as well, when if there's a reason that I have to, I'm moving or I'm leaving a place of work or something, and I know that they're going to have to do this again with someone
Mm,
else or choose not to, up to them, of course, but I feel that kind of the weightiness of that like starting over.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is why it's easier to ghost your therapist.
Ooh, good transition.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to think if I've ever ghosted I have I mean, the therapist I talked about at the beginning that diagnosed me out of the blue, I absolutely ghosted that person.
Mm,
So I have ghosted therapists and I do understand like what, that kind of is. Just
mm,
like, I can't do this. Or something came up and like this isn't really that helpful right now, so I'm just gonna move on.
mm.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, Jess, but I will say that when I get ghosted as a therapist, I understand. I kind of empathize with that and um yeah, it doesn't mean that it doesn't feel kind of disappointing sometimes, or that I feel like, oh, we were doing really good work. I wish we could have continued, or sometimes being worried about the person as well. I'm just like, I hope they're okay because I know they were in the middle of it when they stopped showing up. So it's the mix of all those kind of feelings for me.
I think 100%.
Mm,
Uh, Generally speaking, for like, because you and I have been doing this for over 10 years now, I've had those experiences where I thought I like lost sleep thinking, what did I do wrong? And those were early days. Those are less now. There are definitely sessions where I walk away thinking something just got ruptured. And this can now go one of two ways, right? Um, we are just human. We will get it wrong. Um, and it's sometimes being able to have an opportunity to get it right can create that repair that's so great. And sometimes we can't. And or sometimes a client, kind of like yourself, is like, I don't really want to have to do the work of trying to fix this or put this back on track. Um, Often my tell for the ghost is you should just reach out. So
mm,
any of my clients who are listening to this probably will know if it's happened to them, but like it's there's a part of me that always wonders about the clients that I see, right? It's and so if I haven't seen somebody for a while, I love doing a reach out email just to see how they're doing. I don't necessarily need to see them, but I just want to check in.
mm,
And it often results in people being like, "Oh, I've just been busy," which then you don't have to like interpret, are they ghosting, right? It's just like life happens. It's happened to me so many times where I got to reach out from a therapist. I'm like, "Oh, this has been a crazy month. I haven't even thought about going to therapy."
mm,
And those are awesome. People kind of telling me about life or finances are tough or whatever. And then there's some people that never write back. And I think, you know what? For whatever reason, at this time, I'm not the person for you.
mm,
And that's also been okay. So I totally, it's not like sometimes I'll miss the person, but I never blame somebody for needing to have time off or whatever. And because I've been doing this for a while and been in Toronto for a while now, it's actually really not uncommon to not see somebody, maybe even for 1 or 2 years, for them to come back into my schedule because it's like, well, Jess knows enough of this. So like now that I'm in this stage of my life, maybe I didn't need therapy for a while, but I'm going to come back. And so I never, I never really say goodbye to somebody fully, unless it's been like a planned, like kind of like ending or something like that.
mm, mhm. For sure. Yeah, I think that and clients can always come back. And that's a wonderful thing. Sometimes, even with a formal ending where they're like, yep, we've done the work I wanted to do. I feel great about it. Let's wrap things up. And you do so with intentionality and you take your time with the ending. They still sometimes might come back. Because you never know what's going to come up. We often say that like therapy kind of keeps going after it
Hmm.
ends, as well as it does in between sessions. It's not just that hour, it's not just that month or year or years or however long it is you see a therapist for. That kind of all the stuff that you've talked about and reflected and learned continues to kind of like simmer in the background. Right. So then sometime later you may be like, oh, actually that I do want to explore that a little bit more. Or like now I'm connecting things that I never connected before. I wonder what their take on that would be. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I resonate with what you said there when you first started about like kind of being thrown for a curve more at the beginning. Like I definitely remember, especially if there were ever days as a trainee therapist where multiple clients didn't show. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe it was something about how I showed up the week before that, but like I was more haunted by that then, more haunted by the ghosts than I am now for sure. But that also kind of leads me to think too about what it might be like for therapists to work with other therapists like us. Now, I will say working with other providers is one of my favorite things to do because I often find that we can engage with theory in a little bit of a different way, and they can kind of throw things back at me a little bit and be kind of firm in what they're thinking about themselves. But I do think it's kind of a different experience.
Absolutely. And when I think about my draft email, as much as I was being defensive and we're laughing about it from the client's point of view, it was also this aspect of like recognizing that when I have kind of talked to people about like what I do, it can actually be kind of intimidating to have somebody who is in the field and steeped in this field and doing trainings in this field because sometimes it's hard to remember that a therapist is a client and not someone that you're trying to impress. So sometimes therapists will try to impress me or you, I'm sure, because they know that we know kind of behind the curtains some of the interventions. And now that I know that you might say, good try, but you got transference wrong, they may not be wrong to be intimidated.
Yeah. I do think that there's like I can usually kind of tell after a little while if I'm like, oh, okay, this and I don't know that I would, maybe when I'm not being my best self, I would be like, oh, they're not good. But when I'm, thinking a little bit more clearly, a little less defensively, then I'm kind of like, okay, it's just maybe that we don't think in a similar way, but there's something that I'm working with a therapist that I'm
Mm,
like, oh, okay, we think in a similar enough way and we relate with similar theories that are resonant that
mm,
that I feel like, okay, you get me. I think that
mm,
can be a huge part of a make or break with a therapist. For an individual person, that kind of like therapist client fit is like, do you feel that they get you? It doesn't mean that there's never, extra effort in trying to explain what's going on for you, or that it
mm,
takes a couple discussions before it really clicks between you.
mhm.
But in my experience as a client, at least, if I never feel like they get it, if I always feel like I'm explaining myself, that's not very therapeutic for me. Um,
Mm.
so those are not usually therapists that I would want to stick with.
Yeah. And it can be hard for a therapist to kind of remember that you're just as vulnerable
Mhm.
as the client before, the client after. That just because you're in this field doesn't mean that you're not a human that has things that are going on in the personal life that actually really needs somebody to tend to it with care and vulnerability. Um, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, that managing these kind of moments of, you might have a moment when you're working with another provider where you're like, oh, okay, we're kind of almost like talking about what it's like to be a provider, or we're connecting
Yeah.
about a theory or a type of being, etc. But then you have to be able to clock the moments where it's like, oh, okay, I need to meet this exactly like you were saying, with like care and empathy and tenderness, not
Yeah.
like, oh, and analyze it abruptly worse than I did myself already in my head 9 times today.
Yes, exactly. It's less about the psychoed or even the interventions. At that point, it's just meeting somebody in vulnerability, in doing that linking, in trying to like understand what themes are going up, what tensions. Especially since being in Toronto, I've had therapists that often will just want to talk shop. And at first I kind of have that feeling of like, oh, I'm the client that you get to do this with. And then after a while, I'm like, oh, but that's not serving me. I, in this space, being a therapist is actually not the hat I'm wearing right now. I'd like to be client. And I don't
Mhm.
know if you can see me that way because there's quite a kind of collegial relationship that's developing here. And I think for most people who are going into the therapy space, we don't actually want that right now. Right now, we want to actually be able to get some help.
Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a danger of it kind of falling into more of a mutual
Mm,
support, and that's not what we're there for. That's what a peer support group is for. That's
yeah.
not what therapy is for. Yeah, I definitely feel that.
I think an easy way for any therapist seeing a therapist, just to like kind of like think about this from the flip side,
Hmm.
is really to ask what the person's coming for. What would you need this space to be? If for a lot of people that I see, sometimes this is an hour out of their day where it just gets to be about them.
Hmm.
And for a lot of therapists, that can also be the exact same that you're seeing. So just asking, like, what would be amazing for this space for you? And it might be the kind of thing where, like, I know this stuff, I don't need interventions, or I can work it all in my head, but emotionally, I'm still feeling trapped. Can we go into the emotional space together? Like, usually, because you'll have a therapist that probably understands cognitively or cerebrally, like what their struggles are, they probably will be able to say what they actually need from this space in a way that maybe a client who's not a therapist wouldn't necessarily know exactly what they're seeking out. And so it can be
Hmm.
a really helpful way for you to just be honest with your client and be like, what is it that would make you feel alive at the end of session? What can I do for you? Um, that can be the easiest way to all of a sudden allow your therapist client to just be client.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of framing ahead of time, like what expectations can be, what the needs are, how they like to be met. It can also
Mm,
be a good time to kind of like clock what their common defenses are if they're saying like, I can intellectualize about this all day. I can do that professionally. We could publish a paper together about that. But
yeah,
that at the end of the day is not actually going to help me process the stuff. That's one of my coping and avoidance techniques.
yeah,
Uh, I think very similarly, kind of a later in the session check in or check in after doing something new to be like, does that something that you liked or that landed well with you? And you can use kind of you can lean into the therapist mutuality by kind of saying like, do you like somatic kind of work? Because they'll know the term, and
yeah.
they'll probably be able to tell you if not. So it's one of the first things I tell therapists too is like, if you ask me where I feel something in my body, you're not going to see me again. Like it just doesn't work for me. I use it sometimes myself as a therapist. It's not, so I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I have very strong defenses against focusing in on my body. So I try to kind of like send up the warning flags for therapists. So that's something
Mm.
you could ask a therapist client about too. Like, hey, are there things that interventions or modalities that like just don't click for you that I should know now?
As kind of a flip side of that, and maybe a little bit of a challenge, but not
Mm.
to like the somatic work, but is for therapists that want to be a client, this is actually a really neat opportunity for us to get out of our heads
Hmm.
and let somebody work. If you have five therapists trying to treat one client, we will all have different ways of approaching that client. And not one of them is better necessarily than the other. It's how you're meeting that client. It's why we don't like clients having more than one therapist because it's really unnecessary. Like, unless this person's failing you, generally speaking, their approach might be different, but it can still meet you right where you're at in different ways. And so I think for myself as a client, reminding myself that this person has a way of looking at my problems, just because it's divergent from how I'm looking at them, that actually might be a good thing. I might
Mm.
actually need that level of turning over a story and seeing it differently. And it can help me
Nice.
actually lean into different approaches. It can take me outside of my head because this person isn't seeing the world the way I am or practicing the way I do.
Mhm. No, I very much do agree with that. Yeah, I like to share like the modalities that I'm like that are like oil and water for me. But
Hmm.
I've seen some really amazing therapists that have like a different modality than my favorite to practice. My favorite is psychodynamic. That's what we're kind of all about here. But I
Hmm.
have had some really amazing therapists that are person-centered. And I love person-centered as a provider as well. But I've just noticed that like a therapist that focuses on reflecting the feelings back to me and not the intellectual puzzle, that's where I'm going to actually be able to access deeper feelings. And those are good learning experiences for me as a therapist as well, because then I'm like, oh, okay, my client doesn't always need me to be, intellectually sharp. They need me to meet that vulnerability. So Yeah, as you're saying that too, like there's so many reasons that as a therapist, receiving therapy is really important to see what other modalities are like, to, process our own stuff, or to see what it's like to be on the other side of our modality and kind of notice that like, oh, okay, there's some things that I might be doing that might not be sitting well.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. It also allows us to realize we're not a finished product. I think
Hmm.
when we seek out therapy as therapists, it actually can help us not be complacent as we are in the field longer and longer.
Absolutely, yeah. We often talk about how it's kind of this ongoing journey of self-discovery to be a therapist. And if you're really engaged with what's coming up between you and your clients, I have moments all the time professionally where I'm like, oh, I got some stuff I need to figure out there that I didn't know about. Um, and yeah, that's like, wonderful and also a lot.
Mm,
But for me, that's a fundamental part about choosing this career is like, okay, I need to commit myself to
yeah,
being willing to work on stuff, being willing to allow things into awareness that I was happier not knowing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a field that actually does. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. The more we dig into ourselves, the less we tolerate being a people pleaser, or like how we might have related to people before. It can be
Mm.
tricky and sometimes actually a little bit darker as we start to see like how people might have been treating us in the past that we always thought was normalized. I think that's kind of it for today. And so I was gonna say about finding a therapist. We were talking about ourselves from the therapist perspective as client. But we have
Mhm.
a whole episode on finding a good therapist where you can hear more of our hilarious stories. And also some of our key tips for clients to find somebody. So if you're interested in that episode, it's actually episode 1 of season 2. And
Mhm.
it's how do you find a good therapist? And so if you are actually keen to know more for yourself, give that a listen.
Thanks for listening today. This is Your
Yeah.
Therapist is Not Okay.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.